Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the board meeting from June 23rd of 2022? Motion by Sue. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Guy. Next time. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes.
Okay. Motion to approve the treasurer's report for June 2022.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report for June of 2022. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Gilligan. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? And the motion passes. Next on the agenda is Palmyra Pride, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Kepler.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. So, one up here, Shelley. You can bring your special guest. He's fine. He doesn't want to be up
He
here.
would probably prefer to stay there.
So, each month we celebrate Palmyra Pride, and this is the second month in a row. It's due to membership of our PTO. So, if you don't know, Shelley has served as our middle school PTO president for how many years? 5 years. Okay.
Yeah.
5 years. A lot of hard work, dedication. From my lens far away, I think the middle school PTO is much more involved today than it was a decade ago. I think definitely. Leadership skills are listed, dedication to providing support for teachers, students. And I'm going to go off ad lib here and believe it was the middle school PTO who's helped fundraise for a new sign.
That's being installed on Tuesday.
It's being installed on Tuesday. We have the sign out in front of the middle school had some structural issues, and middle school fundraised and are providing us with a new sign. So we have a certificate for you tonight. On behalf of all of the administration, our school board, we thank you. Incredible. And it reads, certificate of recognition is hereby awarded to Shelley Riegel for her many years of service as president of the middle school's parent-teacher organization. Shelley's leadership skills and dedication to providing support to teachers and students through various PTO-sponsored programs and fundraisers is greatly appreciated. So on behalf of all of us, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was halfway through reading your certificate when I realized, why did I take my glasses off and set them down? I couldn't see. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the recognition.
Enjoy your free time, which you won't have. You'll have it.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kepler. That brings us to the president's report, and Josh Jones did not have anything to report tonight. So we'll move into the visitors' comments. And we have two visitor comments for this evening. As standard procedure, I'll remind you that you have 5 minutes to make your comments, and I'll give you a 30-second warning. And with that, we have Mr. Clee, and he will be addressing the topic of addressing administrative overreach. Mr. Clee.
On June 23rd, 2022, PASD residents were given a few insights into upcoming changes to PASD board policy number 221, the policy about student dress and grooming. Those insights then led to a verbal exchange between Mr. Seth Kleinfowler and PASD Superintendent Bernard Kepler. Between June 23rd and today, some of what Dr. Kepler asserted to Mr. Kleinfowler has prompted me to reflect on the following. Number one, classroom praxis capable of cultivating emotional fragility within students, manipulating student self-awareness, introducing queer theory, and promoting safe spaces. Number two, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas or some variant thereof. Number three, student privacy versus parent rights. Number 4, the Obama administration's May of 2016 U.S. Department of Justice and U.S. Department of Education Dear Colleague letter on transgender students to K-12 public school districts. Number 5, move fast and break things, or at least unsettle them. And number 6, administrative overreach from K-12 public school districts to the federal level. At a Teacher of the Year White House event on April 27, 2022, President Biden asserted to teachers, quote, "They're not somebody else's children, they're yours when you're in the classroom," unquote. The PA Department of Education presently seems to be facilitating gender equity within K-12 classrooms, linking an alleged need for gender equity with an alleged need for safe spaces. The PDE also asserts that binary gender, as in XX and XY, is a quote-unquote faulty concept, faulty in acknowledging that there are only 2 genders, male and female. Administrative overreaches, anyone? Where does the PASD stand as to helping students become the best version of themselves? If the PASD now asserts that it must fully accommodate all alleged self-perceived sexual orientations of K-12 students, then will gender equity demand that PASD school officials require the district to establish safe spaces and in that process selectively keep secrets from certain PASD parents? All things considered, is it possible that a willful cultivation of identity confusion and emotional fragility within K-12 students could be aided and abetted via the gender unicorn, the gender-bred person, or diversity, equity, and inclusion queer theory praxis? Is anyone here aware of a recent Eau Claire, Wisconsin area school district staff professional development session that addressed safe spaces in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion? A school official asserted in that session, quote, "Remember, parents are not entitled to know their kids' identities. That knowledge must be earned. Teachers are often straddling this complex situation. In ECASD, our priority is supporting the students," unquote. Talk about what happens in the ECASD stays in the ECASD. What specific authority grants PASD officials the legitimacy to queer school pedagogy, curriculum, or policy? In this querying process, what rights, if any, are available to PASD parents to understand the objective truth about the reality of their child's PASD querying experiences? And can any such parental right be restricted by a PASD school official's assessment that a particular parent should not receive from the PASD information about gender equity details involving their own child? Concerning administrative overreach, DEI ideology, parent rights, student privacy, and unsettled law, where it may take years to resolve points of contention, as in Kennedy v. Bremerton School District, what tools are now available to the parents of PASD students to effectively protect their own children from becoming corrupted by one form of child abuse or another while attending school? So in reality, just how subservient is the PASD board to DEI ideology, PASD administrators and educators, and the PA Department of Education? Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks for the comments, Mr. Clee. And that takes us to Mr. Kleinfelter. You have 5 minutes.
First, I would like to say that I'm disappointed, but not surprised the board has decided not to have a discussion about males using female facilities. After all, what responsibilities does the board really have? I honestly can't foresee any legal or personal consequences for any of you for choosing to ignore the health and safety of females in this district. After all, there is no evidence that males take advantage of these policies and sexually assault females in schools. But that who's really looking? So how many of you knew that males are allowed to use female restrooms and locker rooms? And if you didn't know, why weren't you informed? After the last meeting, we know that Dr. Kepler knew. The next question is, how many of you know that males are now using the female bathrooms in the district? According to a student that I will not name, I find it interesting that this student is afraid to talk about it in public. Maybe the culture of the district isn't what we think it is. Now, if you decide that maybe this is something you should pay attention to. Eastern Lancaster County School District added an addendum to policy 253, which reads, while the renovation plan for the facilities is being reviewed and executed, wherever we cannot provide private single-user facilities when changing or using the bathroom facilities, all students are to use facilities based on their biological sex. Anywhere within the district that our system has not caught up with renovations, this will be in effect. Any student who wishes additional privacy while changing or using the bathroom facilities will have the ability to use an appropriate single-user facility. Now, while I disagree with the idea that we need to convert every bathroom and locker room to individual changing rooms and bathrooms, it is at the very least a way to protect seniors. Personally, I think we should take a different approach and have some individual changing rooms and bathrooms for those who want more privacy. This building, for example, has at least 5 different individual bathrooms now. By the way, there is a male in Loudoun County School District that is accused of sexually assaulting at least 2 different girls in different schools. The superintendent of that district has been replaced and at least 1 board member resigned. And there is a grand jury currently investigating how the district handled the allegations.
Comments? And that moves us on to the curriculum committee.
Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on June 23rd. There was discussion about an overnight middle school wrestling trip to be held December 9th to 11th at Moon Area High School. There was a presentation by Dr. Richardson, high school principal, on dress codes, and Dr. Spagnola talked about student services and needs report for 2021-22. We also took a look at the emergency instructional time template for 22-23 that is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Public comments, Seth Kleinfelder talked about district mental health services. Jerry Klee talked about the Cougar Closet. Next meeting will be August 25th, 2022. And we have a motion. Motion to approve the curriculum committee items as noted on the curricular consent agenda.
I have a motion to approve the curriculum committee items as noted on the curriculum consent agenda. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Lieberher. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes.
That concludes my
Thank you very much, Mr. Guy. Moving on to staff and administration, I'll turn it over to Ms. Braden.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. We have the minutes from the Staffing and Administration Committee open session of June 23rd, 2022. The first item on the agenda was presentation from Public Financial Management on financial advisor services. The board listened to a presentation regarding financial advisor services. The second item on the agenda was the first aid and safety patrol of Lebanon agreement. We reviewed the agreement of providing basic life support services at a cost of $200 for home varsity football game and EMT services at a cost of $55 per hour for non-varsity home football games during the 2022 season in preparation for a motion this evening. We had public comment by a few members. Mr. Kleinfelder commented questions regarding adding policy. Mrs. Klee asked about the public financial management, their fee for their services, and Mr. Klee asked about consultants involved in the bond process. The meeting adjourned at 7:39 p.m. And the next meeting of the Staffing and Administration Committee is scheduled for this evening, Thursday, June 14th, after the Finance Committee meeting in the district office boardroom and via Zoom. So out of that meeting, we would have the consent agenda. And I would like to make a motion to approve the Staffing and Administration Consent Agenda Committee action items.
Dr. Pepper, any comments before we do that? I'm sorry. Sure. So I have a motion to approve the Staffing and Administration Committee items as noted on the Staffing and Administration Consent Agenda. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you, Ms. Lieber.
Dr. Pepper, did you have items on there you'd like to highlight?
Sure, I will first highlight,
It's rather long.
it is I'm surprised Angela is on her 2 feet with all the hiring that's been taking place in preparation for tonight. The first one, thrilled to recommend to you tonight, Marquise Jones is new assistant principal at Wingle Avenue Elementary. Palmyra resident, high energy guy. He's going to be great for kids. Professional staff hires. You see 6 teachers we're recommending tonight to fill vacancies. We're still getting 3 additional resignations from teachers that you see there. We're over 10% of our teaching force leaving us this year that we're replacing for the fall. I estimate right now we're by about 12% of our entire teaching staff will be new. Catherine Olson, simply a long-term sub approved earlier. We now have a vacancy in music and we're moving her to a contractual role. Mentors by contract and state law associated with each of those new hires for you tonight. 7 new support staff hires we're bringing to you. Some transfers, support staff. One I do note was from instructional aid to a teaching position. So I clarified that one for you. Support staff resignation and our spring coaches are before you tonight. If you see items that are vacant, we have coach there waiting on final paperwork before we can bring them forward. So as an example, that assistant coach for baseball is Brian Young, former volunteer coach that is now being recommended as a paid assistant coach. Is one of those examples that you can see was the process on middle school soccer, et cetera. Of those spring coaches for renewal that have everything in, and a lot of that is renewal paperwork. Every so many years they have to do a renewal training on concussion management, cardiac training, and or updated clearances. And the aforementioned first aid safety patrol agreement. And before you tonight is a tuition student. Student was with us this past year, non-resident student. Family pays the tuition rate of about $10,000 a year to attend. They want their child to go to Palmyra.
Just an item as well for the first aid and safety patrol. Last week there was a question about clearances. We have received confirmation that the individual that will be working there does have all the proper clearances.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Is this rate of staff turnover at the beginning of the year typical, or is this more than average?
This is much more than the norm. We're not alone. School districts across the Commonwealth are facing this. For the first time, we're trading veterans. Used to be veteran teachers didn't move or couldn't move district to district simply based on wages. Now you see veteran teachers when there's a shortage of staff. We're hiring veterans and veterans are leaving to be hired elsewhere. So it's new. The market is more competitive. If we're not competitive, we're going to have a hard time finding people.
And may I ask, have we been able to fill all needed positions, or are we still hiring?
We're still hiring. A few more resignations have come in, so we're still hiring. There are some positions we've struggled to fill where we found people, but perhaps a first choice, not many, but a first choice has turned us down based on a wage offer that we couldn't meet where they were. Example of the Dauphin County, not real close to us, local area teacher in a Dauphin County school. with a few years of experience would have had to take a $5,000 pay cut to come to us and just said, I can't do that. But that's only happened 2 or 3 times to my knowledge where we couldn't get the person we wanted based on wages. But it is sure.
Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns regarding staffing administration? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-1 vote, the motion passes. And that moves us forward to the superintendent report. Dr. Kaplan.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. I have a brief report tonight, providing you with an update on kindergarten enrollment. We're at this time, we're at 171 completely registered students, an additional 50 who have partial enrollment, still waiting on some proof of residency, birth certificate, immunizations, et cetera, for a total of 221 students. So that's under, we expect that to go up by the time the first day of school rolls around. We're oftentimes around that 250 number for kindergarten. It's an area where a lot of parents, not a lot, but some parents choose private kindergartens to ensure a full day programming. And then they come to us in first grade. Others wait, come to us in middle school, et cetera. But that gives you an idea of number of students coming to us. Next item to share with you, I'm pleased to present, and this goes towards that teacher shortage piece that our special ed department with Dr. Setlock's leadership drafted a performance grant for developing future special educators. So that we'll be able to have teachers, Tim Myers, Joanna Redkay, and Stacy Kaufman, all special educators in our high school, will work with sessions for students interested in the field of special education, potential future teachers, and providing 10 one-hour sessions, talking to them about the world of teaching and the profession, and trying to give them background and with those interested in that field to begin with. So thank you to those teachers for participating and for our leadership team for writing that grant. And I did want to provide an update. Last meeting, we had a hypothetical question asked about the rough cost estimate should a future board decide to return the turf complex back to natural grass. We worked with our architect who designed the facility, and this is a rough estimate. We obviously didn't pay him to seek and put time into it, but he was, erosion and sedimentation control, stormwater management, miscellaneous demolition, turf removal and disposal, stone and drain removal under the fields. And while I'm there, I'll talk, for example, the orange field, which is baseball field hockey. That's roughly, there's up to nearly 7 feet of stone, as that serves as basically a lake underneath that field to collect storm water. All of that stone would need to be hauled out and removed because you have to have dirt, sod to hold water to grow natural grass and put the stormwater management plans back in place with natural grass. Then you have turf removal, disposal, stone, et cetera, that's listed there. But he estimates, to make a long story short, $2.5 to $3 million cost if that were an effort to be pursued. Again, I want to emphasize this was asked as a hypothetical. I want that to be reported. Anybody leaving thinking the school board is considering removing the turf complex. If the question was asked, are we locked into that in the future? The answer still remains no. Nobody's locked into anything, but you have an estimate of what it would cost to do. And then I have some beginning of the year events noted in my report. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kepler. We will note the communications that were submitted to the board. And with that being the last agenda item, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion by Ms. Braden. Is there a second? Second. Questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor, please say aye. Motion passes, and we are adjourned.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much. And that will move us into our committee meetings. And looks like our first committee meeting for this evening is Buildings and Grounds. And Mr. Koval usually handles that one. So would you be able to talk us through Buildings and Grounds?
Okay. We have an update on the project?
So, district is moving forward with the replacement of the pool filter. Working with the floor company who's taking provides a turnkey process and essentially engineering architect providing all the necessary drawings to do the process. So currently they're working on those drawings and you should be ordering the final filter here on Wednesday. The hope is that the lead times for that filter, we'll probably put it here sometime in September, and then work starting from there. We also have the issue with the pool pack or the HVAC system that serves the pool. We were able to, in connection with the floor and some of the work that our maintenance department has already done, determine that the coil that is leaking in that HVAC system can be replaced. That has about the same lead time as the filter system, and so that has also already been ordered and will be here for installation. So our hope is that as we work through this part of the project, that after we replace the filter system and put a patch in the HVAC system, that the pool will be usable at some time during maybe late fall or early winter. In terms of, so it's a little bit better than we were looking at before in terms of we were kind of pushing it off and it's going to be a Hail Mary to get anything done for this swim season. Situation's a little bit more positive as we see it today, but we're still working through those details. We're also working with the floor company to address them the long-term renovation of the natatorium, and they will be helping us provide go through a RFP process request to gain pricing on companies that may be able to help us finish off this project. And once again, their responsibility will be to provide all the architectural engineering and all the specific drawings that we need to get them accomplished. So that's where we're at with the pool. Questions?
When does the swim team start their practices?
I believe it's mid-November.
Mid-November for their official practices. They often do preseason at the beginning of October. The official season starts mid-November.
And so they won't be practicing together here? Is there going to be an alternative or they'll just wait?
I would love for us to be done in time. There's a chance, but you heard Mr. Friends say could be in the winter. So we need to rent. We have some plans that are being ironed out with various relatively local pools around us that we can get them in a pool.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Have Mr. Kleinfelder. Mr. Sleep.
This, just because my memory's not that good, the funding for these two items, the coil and the filter, they've already been allocated. We talked about that.
Yeah, at our June 23rd meeting, the money was moved over to the capital project fund.
I didn't remember both of them were covered.
We have
One more. Mr. Laura.
I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, that's all we have for buildings and grounds.
All righty, thank you, Ms. Gilligan. That will take us into finance. And I'll facilitate that one. This evening, we have our contract with River Rock Academy.
So this contract is just for alternative education placement. It's not, at this point, it's not student specific, but it's a contract with River Rock that when approved will give the district the ability, if needed, to place a student there without having to come back for support. You have some place there this past year. Currently, we do not have a need, but we do not use the service. We do not pay for it.
Okay. Any questions on that?
But the cost of that, does that include them being like transported to that location?
No,
and back?
we have to transport it there.
Where is that located?
Oh, there's more than one River Rock facility. I think York County, Lancaster. It's usually a van.
And have we had students based there recently?
We have typically on an annual basis, we've had a student at River Rock. Yellow Reach is another program that you'll see at times between those two. Yeah, a handful of years ago, we used to run our own alternative education program, and the requirements for such are so stringent that very, very few districts operate their own. They're usually a larger district. Operate their own.
What determines like a disruptive view?
It's oftentimes, first and foremost, weapons possession, could be potentially multiple drug violations, acts of aggression, fight. As I said, oftentimes it's a student with a weapon. Or just continue disruptive behavior. As I say that, I'll make sure it's not been, our student situations here have not been due to a weapon in those public workplaces.
Any other questions regarding the contract with River Rock? Okay, so we're looking at athletic season pass proposal.
Yeah, so it's a proposal for athletic season passes. My understanding is that it's a fairly new process that's done a little bit before the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, we didn't have as many, obviously sports were shut down, and then when they came back, not as many fans were there. We haven't had that. So this is just bringing back that process, allowing for a discount for those that would purchase those longer season passes. Our policy will require the board to approve that change. Admission fees.
And was this successful in the past? Did we have pretty good turnovers or didn't we ever?
I think there was, I don't know that it was incredibly well advertised, but folks would purchase and come in. And this was, we're going back 3-4 years probably since it's been in implementation. But if you think about a spring sport, lacrosse, baseball, or even fall soccer, field hockey, relatively 10 home games. So an adult would pay $6 here at Palmyra for $60 for one adult to come in for the fall. If they came to every home game for that season, this would give that a parent buys that ticket, it's $40 to come to all those home games instead of $60. So it does give a break to our families.
How does one get one?
Through Mr. Weidler's office.
And actually, that'll be something after this is approved that as part of publicizing it more, we'll talk about, because we also may want to have some of that traffic coming down through our current office, as Mr. Weidler doesn't have. He's the only one working in there at this point. So we're still working out those details. But want to get the pricing approved before we walk through the rest of the plan.
For a motion at the next meeting. Any other questions for that? Okay. And so that will move us on to the Palmyra Public Library annual donation.
This is an annual item that is on our agenda, and this will be a motion. Historically, the district has made a $2,000 donation to Palmyra Public Library. Should note that in researching this item, it appears that we did not seek approval for the final approval for the donation for last school year, 2022. So in addition to the motion for 2023, I would just like to see the authority to provide that for the last school year as that was intent. I think what happened was a presentation was provided as normal. The board wanted to entertain discussions about possibly increasing the rate. We then ran into some issues with board meetings being canceled and some of the other issues coming up, and it just fell off the radar. So then it came back, transition business managers. So I've got to finish up with it. I noted as I was researching this item for the current year, we did make that donation. It should be noted that the donation the year before that was fully funded by donors. district received from outside individuals to fund that as well. So it's been a little bit of a weird item the last couple of years. But just wanted to provide that as an update on the thing that I was able to find, and kind of go through the research.
And I'd like to speak to this because last year in July, I had brought forth a suggestion at looking at possibility of increasing that $2,000 donation. Has been $2,000 for the last 10 years. And if you know anything about how the public library works, basically they have to spend money in order to get reimbursed. So that if they don't have the money, they can't run the programs and they can't get reimbursement from the state. If you just take a look at some of the things that the library does for us and that the district benefits, these are some of the programs that are running right now. Little Explore, early learning program. This has been going on all summer. It's run out of the Palmyra Church of Brethren. They also have a STEM program that they're emphasizing during this. We have summer learning programs set aside for tutoring. We also have, just to give you an idea, on June 20th, there was a program, Adventures at the Aquarium, in which we had 283 children attend. On June 27th, Magic with Eddie Ray, we had 268. We have upcoming programs going on dealing with musical presentations and reptiles. And again, it's set up to stimulate learning, stimulate the process of teaching the kids reading skills. And of course, we also have a model program that's run out by Home Lutheran Church, which is the Phoenix Center, which impacts mainly middle school kids and acts as a safe haven for them from the time the middle school closes until their parents can pick them up. And this represents study time. It represents activities inside of Palm Lutheran in our gym. So again, keeping those kids off the street. So we had talked about this last July, and of course we got all involved in the election and the new board members and also the mask programs. And therefore, Dr. Spagnola had originally reached out to Kelsey, who was the librarian, to come and do a presentation. And just because of time and what we were doing, she never got that opportunity. So she can do a much better job of explaining exactly what the library does, especially for the elementary and the middle school, and how that impacts on the district. So I would like to suggest for the 2023 budget that, in fact, we have Dr. Spagnola invite her to come in so we can do some planning and see if we can increase that.
Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from Mr. Guy regarding that? I fully support that movement. Dr. Spagnola, are you doing that for us?
The money that they did not get last year, that has been put aside and is there to be able to give them now?
I can still, through some accounting tricks that we'll keep in this room, but we'll note that it was intended that $2,000 had to be paid from last year, so we can pay that out of next year's budget, and then approve $2,000 for this year, pay it out of this year's budget. So we can keep them separate as long as the board provides the motion that way.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the engagement letter, which is our public financial management.
And this, just to clarify for this won't be a motion item. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. So last meeting, we had a presentation from Brad Remedy and his team of public financial management, of their financial services that they do provide to secure those services and make sure that we're ready to move on any bond issues or anything that come up. Once again, we don't have anything really pending at this point. It just allows us to continue to work together. Is the engagement letter that notes that we would be engaging them for their financial advisor services. There is no cost associated to these services unless we use them, and the cost that will then be paid for those services through the issuance of the bonds. Part of the cost of the bonds as we go through that process should be basically all.
Any discussion on the engagement letter? That, can we move forward? Okay. All righty, that takes us to the 21-22 audit engagement.
So this is just for informational purposes. This is standard letters that are provided to our auditors as they start the engagement. The engagement letter just has some broad overviews of what should be expected during the audit, who has responsibilities for what, responsibilities of not only the auditor, but the administration in the process, and talks a little bit if there's disagreements or issues that the administration and the auditors cannot resolve, some of the process that might happen there. Once again, this is just a very standard letter. It's provided to the board of directors and the administration to get the necessary information.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that? All right, and how about the 22-23 state budget updates?
So as one of our Pasco representatives called it, I think the state budget was passed on June 38th of 2022.
Yeah.
But last week, the state did approve the budget. And so providing some information on the numbers we have. As you can imagine, when things are changed as they are or updated in the budget process, it takes some time to sort through some of the details and truly understand what's being required from some of the other issues. So we have some other items that may be non-financial that we will continue to work through and bring to the board members as time allows, and updates from there. There were a lot of changes in the school safety aspects and things like that. But here's a comparison of the approved state budget amounts and the differences in state subsidies that were provided. As you can see, huge increase or a big increase. We anticipated about a 3% increase in basic education funding. I think the total increase was around 13%. So that's an additional $750,000. Read and Learn Block Grant had no change, and about a little more than $200,000 for special ed funding. A lot of the adjectives that were used as we were going through the process of understanding this budget was historic, but the state really did make great investments in education with this budget in this year. So those the items on the top, the Ready to Learn Block Grant is a grant, but is already included. Expenses for that normally are already included in our budget. The basic education funding and special education funding have no requirements to spend those dollars down. So there's no need to increase our expenses right now for those. The items on the bottom, there's essentially two different safety and security grants, one for mental health and one for physical aspects of security. For each of those, we received a little over $150,000. So that's about $300,000 in additional revenue. However, those are grants, and they have specific items that we must spend those on. What the administration is doing currently is looking at our current budget. Are there things that we already plan to do that we could spend those dollars on, or that would fit in the categories to be acceptable to spend those dollars on, or are there other things that we may need to add to our budget to properly expend those? We're currently working through that process now. Some of that is getting the details of the grant, which will not be available until August 1st, or they're required to be open by August 1st, and we're required by August 31st to submit our plan for those. So glad they gave us as much time as they could. very hopeful that the increases in state subsidy, basically in basic education and special education, are ongoing. This is not, hopefully, and this hasn't been communicated to us yet, so this is something that we'll spend the next year essentially seeking and trying to understand whether or not, or how much of this money was just one-time federal dollars and how much of it was state dollars that they're committed to year after year. If there's state dollars committed to year after year, this will be a huge help to us as we go through our budget process and addressing our needs that we have. But like I said, we first have to make sure that the rug won't be pulled out from under us and properly account for these dollars.
Yeah, as we said, the word I've used in Mike and I's conversations, if that's the new floor for our state budgeting, it's a game changer for our district and local taxpayer for a while. It helps us immensely.
May I ask, could the safety and security possibly be used to offset the cost of the school resource officers?
We don't know. When we get the details that Mike mentioned, we have no information yet on any specific requirements and allowed expenditures, but I'm guessing it's a possibility.
We would hope, but by the very nature that that's a grant, it might be able to use it for the first year, but the money may not be there the second year. That's the whole pitfall.
Right. It would save us the amount of what that position will expend us in a year.
Right. That's the reason why it's more beneficial to put it in hardware and things of that nature, which are one-time, expenditures.
Correct. Okay. We'll be, as soon as we have the details, we're going to be meeting. In fact, ahead of getting those details, we have our administrative retreat. When I say retreat, we'll be locked in one of our libraries for 2 days for 8-hour meeting sessions where we're developing vision and goals for the upcoming year. One of the topics we're discussing is school safety and talking about our needs and this grant before we even have what's allowable. As Mike said, we have 30 days from the time we're going to get the details to submit the grant, so we have to start ahead of even knowing what we're allowable, what's allowable.
Certainly, and Mr. Guy, my intention wasn't that it would pay for the entire salary of that position, but I knew that it had come in so low that we're struggling.
Right.
So I thought if we could use that maybe to have a more appealing offer while we work that into our budget. Just a thought.
Certainly. That's good idea. Pay for any differential. Good idea. Yeah.
Any other questions regarding the budget at this point? Now take us then to the public comment. Do we have?
All the same individuals.
Okay. Mr. Kleinfelter?
Give money to charities every year. And I feel good about doing that. For some reason, I don't get the same feeling when I pay my taxes. I don't think it's appropriate for any organization with taxing authority to be giving money to charities. You get to choose where that money goes, and it's not appropriate for you to decide that somebody else's money should go to something you approve of. As much as I like the public library, I'm happy to donate money to that. It's not your choice to donate the money that this district has. That's entirely appropriate.
Yes, I definitely have some comments. So regarding the state budget update, I think it is a historic increase, and as Dr. Kepler noted, it is a game changer as far as the budget of this district. I'm curious if the board plans on inviting any of our elected officials to speak to taxpayers, the board itself initially, but also take questions from the public and taxpayers in this district. As you may or may not know, our current rep who covers this district, Frank Ryan, voted against this budget. And our future representative, Russ Diamond, who will cover the borough and North London area, also voted against this budget. And I find that unacceptable in a district where 70% of the budget is shouldered by taxpayers, local taxpayers. I would love for you to invite both of those. Frank's on his way out the door, but invite Russ Diamond and explain his thought process in voting against this budget that is so desperately needed for the taxpayers in Palmyra. So I hope you'll consider that and make that offer to him each and every meeting moving forward.
Thank you. Your request has been noted.
Just to reinforce it, I just would love to hear the legislative reasonings. They seem to be able to go out of line as far as appointing a state flower or something simple like that, or
State
posting, yeah. But when it comes down to actually impacting on the community, you just never hear anything. And, you know, I supported Frank for Mr. Ryan for quite a few years. I got hung up over this thing that he was actually going to do something for tax reforms and property tax. And I guess I finally woke up that it was just a pipe dream. It was a pipe dream, and I feel well, I'm awake now. I realize this wasn't a good idea. So, yeah, I'd like to know what he really accomplished, and I think that's an insult when you have two individuals representing us, supposedly working for us. This is something that they could really do to impact the burden. Because the problem with property tax is it's not like sales tax. It's not like income tax where, you know, you're paying for it the whole year. It comes all at once, and it's always a shock, and it's always something that sticks in everybody's mind. So it's just not the best thing in the world. Yeah, I'd love it.
If I remember correctly, he used to attend our board meetings regularly, maybe once a month or once every couple of months to give us updates and such. So I think that would be a good idea. Could we reach out to him, Dr. Kepler? Is that something?
That's the will of the board. We're happy to do it.
Okay. Ed Russ Diamond as well. Perhaps. Okay. And that concludes the Finance Committee for us this evening. And that will move us into staffing and administration.
First item on the agenda is board policy, second reading. Recommended to approve the second reading of board policy number 913, non-school organizations / groups/individuals.
So no changes since the first reading. This is the same version you've already read.
Dr. Kepler, are there any comments, questions, or concerns on board policy number 913? Second item on the agenda would be novel approval.
Yes, that is actually me. Dr. Kepler and I, with COVID, and hopefully I'm not knocking on the wall, but we are looking at bringing back to you, to the board, all of the novels that are being read in the school as supplemental material. What we found as we were looking is it's just good to refresh and bring things. We have 6 new board members. So what I have in front of you now is a very small list. I started at the end of the year when everything's crazy. So I asked middle school and high school ELA teachers, what are some books that you're currently reading? I wanted, as new board members, just to refresh or to give you an idea of how long they've been using these novels. So one column says number of years. You'll see the actual class that uses them, and then what grade level, and then the text name and author, the copyright of the book, and then what the books were recommended for. My plan is to continue every other month bringing you additional lists. We still have elementary, we'll have social studies, we'll have science. I don't believe we have math, but we may at the elementary level have some math books that kind of introduce. We spoke to our attorneys about just what does policy 109 resource materials mean? Because when it was originated years and years ago, it was like film strips and things like that. Her definition was anything that is graded. So if a teacher uses a novel and asks for some comprehension questions or some sort of grading, that constitutes a resource. So I just wanted, in true transparency, we are just trying to bring out to the board our additional resources. With the internet and things like that, we're not just solely relying on textbooks anymore. So this is going to be a beast, but we feel like bringing it out and being transparent is where we're going. You'll look on here, there's one book, I believe. The other column, the second column actually is mandatory versus optional. Many of the books, as you get more to the high school, they might give the students 10 books to choose from, and the students pick one of those books. So they're optional in that not every student in the classroom has to read them. However, whatever book the students choose, they're still getting graded on it. So it's still considered something we need to be board approved. So the board, as you're looking at these columns, if there's additional things you would want me to add here, if you think I'm giving you too much information and you just want to know the title and the author, I can certainly do that, but I was trying to provide as much information as I thought you would need. I believe, Dr. Kepler, there was one book, Lit Standards 9, the crossover. That is one book that has not been approved by any former boards. So all of these that have already been done have been approved when we had new textbook adoption and things like that. This is the only one that at our next meeting, when you go to, I'm guessing we're going to have them approve them each. Like next one would be a motion to approve this list. Just know that I just want to, in true transparency, show you that in this group, there is one book that has not ever been taught yet. I did ask, because it was so late in the year, I did ask them to solely write the books down that were for the first couple months of school. So when I say this is the tip of the iceberg, like it is a massive project. But I wanted to make sure that we're ready to begin the year with the books that they're currently teaching. Again, parents that aren't happy with a book or two, if there's not an optional book, there are, we do have, and I don't know the policy off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, 109 is the processes associated with
it.
A concern with the book.
That parents can, say, I want my child to have an optional activity or whatever. And many, teachers do that, but this is for the majority of our students.
These are all novels, so they would all be fictional work.
There are, in here, they're not all novels. There are some short stories in here as well. And there are, like, there's an autobiography. There's, I was looking earlier and I knew a couple of them said there are some short stories located in here as well. I will be bringing forward to you also, we had a high school, it's an optional course, it's called Film Studies. But as part of 109 resource materials, the films that are shown in Film Studies will also need to be board approved. So that will be part of this list as well.
And anytime a parent has a question, this list be provided to them.
What'd you say?
Some good books on here. Very good.
And you'll notice there's a few copyrights that are way older than all of us that are in this room.
Graduated 1863.
All right, thank you, Dr. Simon, that's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Are there any other comments, questions, or concerns on the novel approval? The item on the agenda this evening would be public comment.
We'll start at the bottom this time, Mr. Marva.
Thank you. I sure could have comments. So as Dr. Kepler mentioned earlier in the staffing and administration agenda in the regular meeting, it does concern me that the rate of resignation seems to be increasing to a dire number. I also understand that half of the special education staff is new, is replaced, which is concerning. So I'm concerned that one, as it's my understanding that in this district, as far as the districts in the county, Palmyra for an entry-level teacher, starting teacher, has either the lowest or the second lowest by a few dollars starting annual salary. So if we already start so low, it's going to be difficult for us to attract other talent as our aging talent or veteran talent moves on to make $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 at neighboring districts in the region. So I'm curious, not with just the professional staff of teachers, but also the non-professional staff as well that we seem to have trouble holding on to due to market forces. You know, custodians can make more money working at sheets than they can here for the district. So I'm curious, and I would like to hear from some of the board members specifically tonight, what the plan is to address the gap. Do you plan on opening the teacher contract up again? Mandy had mentioned you're having trouble filling the public safety officer position. That what you're currently offering for that, you won't find anybody with any qualifications to do that. So what is the long range plan over the next 2 or 3 years to not just keep our talent, but attract new talent at least market rates? I can't believe we would continue on this path of having the lowest starting entry salary in the county.
I'll just jump in before any board members comment and just indicate from a labor perspective, this board under labor law, will enter negotiations with our support staff union, required to do that by January, as their contract expires June 30, 2023. So support staff will be addressed through that process. From a professional staff perspective, the PAEA and school districts settled a contract that began, it's an interesting timeline, their contract starts September 1. So September 1, 2021 was year one of a new 5-year contract. So that labor agreement is set for the next 4 years. And at this time, that's what's in effect for us at this point. It is, Mr. Loudermilk, I would say it is something that in this room, this board, with this administration has discussed. This board is well aware that that's an issue. It needs to be looked at. We haven't discussed it any further.
It is on our radar, Mr. Loudermilk. Absolutely. I think to not address or contemplate would be many the school district. But as far as the plan goes, I don't believe that we can provide you with something at this moment in time. Absolutely on our radar.
I don't think gas prices being about $5 a gallon is really helping us either. Because many of our staff are choosing to leave for vacation and or money.
It's definitely more appealing in the
That's
current
been
economic
a trend comment.
Thank you.
Would you next one, I think, but
Oh, that's okay. I have one question. Is that novel list going to be available online?
On our website when we're done, or I don't know if we talked about adding.
Now that it's been shared publicly, we're happy to send it to you. If you have an email you can share with us, we can email it to you. Well,
the general public.
It will be for the voting meeting. For tonight's committee meetings, they get presented in the public meeting first, and now they're available to
And I just have one comment that I'm raising my hand for. And this is just an example, one tiny little example out of the whole school district. But as retired people, we just got our tax bill and it's 3/4 of a month's income. So we have the other quarter of income for utilities, food, gas. Just as a touch base, so you know where one person's coming from. I don't know how many people are that way, but. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
What? So anything that is graded is a resource. And so are there any entities or products that are graded that are not included and therefore are resources that are not included on that list?
I'm gonna be adding to that list all year. This is just an example of the first 2 or 3 months.
Right, because there's a number of other entities that my understanding are utilized by the public school system and are graded that do not fall under novels, under short stories, et cetera, right? So there are a lot of things that are graded and therefore are resources that I don't think would fall under the parameters of
Can you
what
give
you
me an
said.
example?
Well, I mean, like poems. I mean, whenever I went through school, poems you were graded on poems, you were graded on all,
If
like you
it's-
said, the films, there's various, there's a whole variety of literature, okay, that are other than novels.
Most of the poems and things like that are in the anthologies that have already been approved when the courses were approved.
Like
So these are
Palmyra
additional resources that aren't in the anthologies of the course. So if a poem would be used outside of, and it's not in the anthology, that will eventually be on this list.
But Shakespeare would be on the list.
It's already
There's
on,
already
because there's
Shakespeare.
already
So it's
Shakespeare
a
on it.
play.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you'll be able to tell by it if it's mandatory, meaning all students are reading that same, or if it's an option of which, if there's a Shakespeare unit, they might have 4 Shakespeare plays that the students get to choose from.
So the list will be comprehensive as to resource when it's done.
Yeah, it's just gonna take a little bit. This here was very time consuming for the 6th through 12th grade teachers, so, yeah. That's my hope, Mr. Clee.
Sure, we appreciate it.
That's my hope.
Thank you.
So, 2 things. You already have a list of approved materials. Apparently, because you were talking about these are already approved. So you have a list somewhere. Where's that list? Where's that information? Is that what-
What we're attempting to do is we have a textbook list. It's predominantly textbook. What we're bringing forward to you in full transparency is trying to, because we have decades of history that is not at our fingertips. We're bringing to you the non-textbook resources. So we have a textbook list.
But she said specifically, every one of those books was already approved except for one.
To our knowledge.
Yeah.
Our attempt here is to say, being new in 9 years and in 3 years, we're bringing forward what we know is being utilized in our classrooms to verify that this administration is bringing to you what the resources are that are being used. So we can ensure and meet the goal you're asking about of what's being used.
Well, it just sounds like there's already an approved list somewhere. And I'm just asking where that list is. So that
Textbook, and yes, I can provide that to you from a textbook perspective. That's the list of approved textbooks that I'm aware of.
And how extensive is the resource material? You're talking about novels, books, and films. They're now online resources.
Correct. Those are the challenges. Those are what we charge our teachers with using professional discretion. To your point, to your question, there's no feasible way for a body to approve every resource that a teacher selects on a daily basis. That's what they're charged to do on a professional basis.
Should those teachers that choose to use materials outside of what's already been seen and approved by the board be required to track and report it?
They report, they have lesson plans that they record what they're doing each day for each class, each lesson.
So that information could be made public as to what materials they're using. Is that correct?
We would not, the teacher's lesson plans are not a public record.
Okay. Well, how about if we have them just add a couple of lines to those reports and actually report the materials that they're using, if they're using anything outside of the books that are already authorized materials.
That's what a board hires. I think a board hires an administration for that oversight. That's our job, to manage that, ensure teachers are using viable resources that are appropriate for the age of the student to teach.
If there's a parent, that would be concerned or whatever, there's, the syllabus and everything is given to students at the beginning of every year. So those resources are prepared as families are looking at things. If they're interested in knowing, it's in their Schoology, it's in the student Schoology folder and things like that. So that, if this isn't comprehensive enough when I'm done with that, there are places for parents to be involved in their child's education, to go in and look at their.
This list doesn't include, a resource is not going to include a worksheet that a teacher is choosing to utilize that might be an external resource outside of the specific math worksheet that comes with our program. They're charged with knowing their students and identifying resources needed to educate the student within that curriculum.
I'm asking these questions because I had a conversation with a parent. The student came home with a URL that was written on a piece of paper for a YouTube video. And the parent couldn't watch it. And the child was unhappy with it.
The parent couldn't watch it?
Yep. Tried to get on and watch it. I have a copy of the page with the URL on it. I can't access it either. I don't know what's going on with it.
What?
But
Could the child?
I'm sorry, what?
The child couldn't get it either?
No, the child watched it during the day at school. But later that day, the parent couldn't. That's the story I have. So my question is, do we collect that kind of information and do we make it available to the public?
We do not.
And if not, shouldn't we?
I do not believe so. If there's a concern specific to an issue, we'd be happy to look at it. If a parent wants to send us that, be happy to look at it. If we're going to be doing that level of oversight on teachers, our turnover will increase monumentally. I charge our teachers with, they know what's appropriate, what's not.
There are all kinds of media that you get parent permission to share. I remember signing off for my son to be able to watch Newsies at the school. But YouTube videos, you don't have that.
No.
And that concludes our staffing and administration.
Yes, I believe so, thank you.
And that is our last committee meeting. Looks like our before this evening, correct? Okay. So we will take a 5-minute break. How about 7:21? We will be back here for executive session. Thank you very much to everyone for coming, for your questions. We are discussing personnel issues. Thank you.